Do you want your business to grow faster? Are you open to new and out-of-the-box ways to drive revenues and increase value? How do you imagine the most successful entrepreneurs and business leaders double, triple, or expand their businesses tenfold or more? The answer is Deals. This is a weekly podcast featuring conversations with business owners, executives, and leaders as we reveal behind-the-scenes details that give you, our listeners, the confidence to pursue your own deal-driven growth. On this show, we discuss a huge variety of deals, everything from large, complex mergers and acquisitions, capital raising, joint ventures, strategic alliances, real estate, affiliate and sponsorship deals, franchising, and more. My name is Corey Kupfer, and I've been supporting deal-driven growth for businesses for over 35 years as a successful entrepreneur, professional negotiator, and attorney. My goal is to help you strategize, plan for, find, and complete deals that will help your company grow faster. Welcome to the Deal Quest podcast. Let's get started. Dia Bondi is a communications catalyst for high-impact people. In her private coaching and programs, she works with C-level leaders, VC-backed founders, and ambitious professionals, helping them find their voice and lead with it. Her workshops and talks are hosted by corporations, including Quartz, Salesforce, Google, X's, Team, and Dropbox. In global sports, she helped the Rio de Janeiro secure the 2016 Summer Olympics. That's really cool. After attending auctioneering school for fun, she translated the techniques she learned into programs that prepare ambitious professionals, and especially women, to ask for and leave nothing on the table, called Ask Like an Auctioneer. She has been featured on CNBC, Make It, Forbes, and Fast Company. Her book, Ask Like an Auctioneer, How to Ask for More and Get It, is available now. Dia, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Corey.
So listen, obviously, I think some of our listeners can anticipate how some of those skills can play into deals, and we're going to jump into all that and some of great stories and background. But before we get there, I want to take you back to when you were a little kid growing up, maybe 10, 12 years old. What did you want to be? Because I'm guessing a communications, professional coach, trainer, trained auctioneer. I'm guessing maybe none of that was in the picture back then, but you tell me.
I wanted to be a long-haul truck driver.
A long-haul truck driver.
100%. I don't know where folks are listening from, but when I was a kid, there was this signature show on television called Dukes of Hazzard. And there was like two cousins, I think they were cousins, and they drove around in this sort of like hot rod, and they were so cool. And they had this one cousin, Daisy, who was just this like total hot, powerful woman who would roll up in one of the hot rods, and you'd never know it was her until she came out. And it was like, oh, I thought it was some dude in there, drag racing. But then no, it was Daisy. And I just had this vision that I would be out on the open road in my sleeper 18-wheeler that was polished chrome to the nines, and I'd rip up to a Love's truck stop, and my windows would be obscured, but if I opened the door, I'd come out of my own truck, and I would be not what you thought. That was the picture I had in my head.
Oh, I love that.
Weirdly, though, Corey, when I look back at my career, I can say that the two things I really wanted ended up happening in my professional career as a communications coach, but just not on the open road driving an 18-wheeler. One of the two things I really love and value a lot are adventure and deeply connected experiences. And it makes sense to me that I would have wanted to do that because adventure has always been so powerful, and it always felt, that picture in my mind always felt like an adventure. So there it is.
I love that. Yeah, it is interesting to see how some of, in 300 and, whatever we are, 70 some odd episodes, there are only a handful of folks who actually were like, no, actually, I was, thinking about that as a kid. Almost nobody is the case. But there are these elements of things, and it's interesting that you identify that do carry forward, even if they manifest very, very differently later in life. So that's
100%. In fact, that insight is sort of one of the tools I use to help a leader sort of name and claim and discover, which is usually something very innate in their own voice, but name and claim it as an attribute of their own voice, is to actually look back at those very questions, not to tell your life story, but to recognize, like, who are you no matter what you're doing? For me, whether I'm sitting in a room doing script writing with senior leaders in an Olympic bid, or I'm out on the Route 66 in my 18-wheeler, I'm kind of being the same, little bit of like a rabble rouser, a little bit of it's still me. And so knowing what those core drivers are and the ways in which we show up, no matter what our quote unquote job is a really key component of unlocking, knowing your own leadership voice.
I love it. All right. And I want to get more into that. But one more question looking back, which is, what was the first deal of any type that you were involved in in your career, or maybe something when you were much younger? You tell me.
Well, the first deal that was transformational or the first deal that I can just remember?
Whatever you want to talk about.
I might give you one of each.
Okay, give me one of
I
each.
hope everyone will
Perfect.
hang in with me.
It's all good.
So the very first deal, and I probably did it multiple times, but it stands out as like a very meaningful deal I made. And I tell the story in my book, Ask Like an Auctioneer, where I used to do this thing with my cousin Kelly when I was a kid. I grew up in a post-war small neighborhood, a tract that was developed in the early 50s, and all the houses are quite close together, except right across the street was the old farmhouse in that space that still had a couple acres around it. But then we were all like little stucco houses, built around it. And I used to go across the street. I'll anonymize her to Ms. Alkemer. I tell the story in my book. I call her Ms. Alkemer, but that wasn't totally her name. Ms. Alkemer's house. And me and my cousin Kelly would collect rocks from her driveway because she was the only neighborhood in the street that had like a shale driveway that would go back next to her rose garden and under a tree. And we would take rock and we'd take them back to my house. Let's just be real. We stole them. Went back to our house and we would like wash them in the kitchen sink. And then we would like put Crisco on them or olive oil or whatever we had to make them all shiny. And then we would put them on a little tray with a doily underneath it. And then we'd go around the neighborhood and specifically back to her house. And I sold her her own rocks for a nickel a piece.
Do you think she was on to you and just humoring a kid, or do you think you pulled it? You actually pulled it off?
I'm sure she was onto us, but it doesn't matter. I felt like I'd done a deal, and she was happy about it. She was delighted. Oh, I'll take that one and that one. I remember that feeling like, I feel like when we were taking the rocks, she was like looking out her window. Like she knew. She loved us. Yeah. She was always a wonderful, supportive presence in my neighborhood, but that felt like a deal for me. And it kind of set the tone, I think, for how I am in the work I do and how I show up to partnerships and how I show up in asks and negotiations. So that's one.
And the other one?
The other one was, I'm going to call it a good 41 years later. The most transformational deal I ever made was, I work with VC-backed founders very often, usually when they're Series B and beyond. So they have product and market, they have growing teams. They're not what we'd call pre-revenue, like there is revenue. And I, for years, had been, writing contracts that's just like, here's what it is to retain me, la, la, la. And I just thought, I've got to be leaving something on the table. Just because I'm not a formal advisor doesn't mean I couldn't do things like ask for shares.
Yes.
And so a handful of years ago, a good 40 years after selling Ms. Alkemer's rocks back to herself, I said, look, I tested it with one of my clients. I said, look, here's my contract rate, but how about you do this much in cash, this much in shares? And I turned $30,000 project into $1 million. Plus, I still have more shares sitting there. And for some folks listening, $1 million doesn't feel like a big deal, but it's a big deal. It was a big deal. It was transformational for our household. And it's sort of a longer story, but that felt like another deal. Again, it had the same vibes about it in my silly rock story. It felt like it was good for both of us. It got us both our skin in the game. We were delighted at making it happen. They were so happy to go like, we'd love for you to have some skin in the game. I was so happy to have some skin in the game.
It's really interesting on that, just to stick on that kind of deal. And those of us who are professionals or service providers or whatever comes up for us, right? I get offered equity a lot of times. And it's really interesting because on the one hand, you look at, even for example, with some of these entertainers, I mean, Dr. Dre made more money on Beats, on owning a piece of, Beats headphone than he ever did. And he made a lot of money in the music industry, right? Blown away in terms of scale, became a billionaire because of Beats. Other people, and it's happening in entertainment and other places where people are, the artists are much more understanding about owning things as opposed to just. And then, it comes up on the level of service providers and people and whatever. And it's interesting because it is a huge upside opportunity. On the other hand, the percentage of time I actually take equity compared to the times I am offered equity, because listen, let's face it, most of the time that equity is going to be worth zero. Even a company continues along, some of them are going to go out of business, some of them are going to fail, but even some of them are just going to go along and sort of make money, but there's never a monetization event. So it's an interesting question on when you do it, but there could be, significant upside.
Yeah, I mean, for me, again, this might feel low level, but I need to come to my client work with just a pile of confidence, a pile of force and a pile of, this is going to sound real cheesy, but a pile of love. A lot of my job with my clients is to just love them enough to tell them that they have an ugly baby. And I recognize completely that I will ask for and take deals like that or look for asymmetrical upside in the limited ways in which I'm exposed to it. I don't manage a fund. For folks who are listening who are in the consulting side, or, you're doing like retainer-based work, like finding those opportunities is not super easy and they're not everywhere. I mean, nice for you, Corey, that you have people throwing share opportunities at you and you're having to bat them away, but that's not true for all of us. That I need to always ask myself, if this went to zero, if this was worth nothing, and I knew that right now, would I still want to do this work with this person?
Yeah.
And if the answer is yes, because, the component of us putting in place a contract is very transactional, like the relationship can't be. Like, I want to be excited when they call me on the weekend and say, I got to prep for this big thing tomorrow because something happened in the emergency. And then, we got to get our CFO on the line. I got to be like wanting to pick up their call.
Yes, totally makes sense. All right. So I want to delve a little bit more into what you do, because obviously there are a number of different folks out there that put people in communications, and many of them I wouldn't have on the podcast because none of what they do is deal related, not because they may not be great at what they do, whatever, but obviously this is this podcast is deal related. And some of what you do is much more related to deals. You mentioned companies that are raising capital, right? You mentioned a couple other things. We talked in pre-call about companies that are doing M&A, things like that. So there are a lot of ways that you can coach executives. Maybe they're just doing internal pitches to their team. Maybe they're just doing, but then there's like raising capital, there's M&A, there's all kinds of joint venture, strategic alliances, whatever that come into play. So tell us a little bit more overall what you do, even if it's not deal related, but then, drill in a little bit on some of the examples of where you work with executives on the communication that affects deals.
I think of it like clients call me when they need to speak powerfully at really critical moments. And it could be a singular moment, like literally at 3:30 in 2 Thursdays, I got to sit down with a potential partner and blah. Or it could be, I'm in a phase right now in my business where my chiefs of staff, my other executive folks, my board members have told me that and I recognize that I'm still kind of talking like a product manager, and the future of my business in the next 6 months is really going to rely on me having strong founder voice, knowing what it means and feeling like and being able to speak in a more executive elevation, which is not about having executive presence, whatever that is.
Right.
It's literally about recognizing that I shouldn't be doing my product demos anymore. I need to be talking about my leadership philosophy and engineering. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes.
Knowing that you're coming in kind of low for where you need to be. So it could be a phase or it could be a specific moment. Both of those are moments in my mind. So what I do is understand the stakes. Like, are there stakes? Because the work that we do is not skills-based. It can be sometimes, but it's not the main, my most favorite client where we really could do the best positive damage. I think it was like, we're doing damage, but in the most positive way, is not about skills-based communication. It's not like, where do I put my hands and how do I do a dramatic pause? And I need to be better at closing deals. What are the words I use? It's not that. It's about, there's this really great quote. Miles Davis says, it takes a lifetime to sound like yourself.
Yeah.
And that is because the difference between a fabulous trumpet player and being Miles Davis is Miles Davis. It's not about how well he can play the notes. It's about, does his voice come through the music he's playing? And so what I'm interested in is your leadership voice is a strike point for your leadership, can help drive decisions and resource clenching. We're clenching those two things at critical moments, a singular moment in time or a phase in your business, such that your voice comes through the scripts that your comms team is writing for you, so you can make more courageous choices about the stories you draw on, so you can come in at the right elevation and not show up as a head of engineering, but talk like a product manager. That's what I'm talking about. Because really the difference between being a skillful communicator and having a leadership voice is you.
Yeah, I love that, because I see a parallel like in the trainings, for example, I do on negotiating, right? There's so many trainings on negotiating that are just about tactics and counter tactics and strategies and frameworks and whatever, right? I talk about the internal journey. Because if you don't have what I call clarity, detachment, and equilibrium, if you haven't done the work to get totally aligned and clear, if you come in from a place of scarcity, of fear, or desperation, or whatever, I don't care what tactics you put on top of it, you're not going to be successful. And you're talking about, the way I hear it is, you're talking about the equivalent conversation in speaker training and communications training. It's so funny. Like, there's certain things I can identify. Like, I know when they went to some course. Like, there's so many people who you see, I don't know, they were told like this is like a power position of the hands, right? And you see them like doing this thing, right? And you could tell it's like somebody told them they should do that. I'm not saying there aren't some people who do that at times that are natural to them, but you can tell when something is natural to somebody, when it's something that they've been trained to do or think they should do, or they're remembering to do, or whatever it is,
100%. So I run this thing called the Transformational Voice Intensive 4 times a year. I usually work with enterprise or ventures come to me. I don't have a lot of open public offerings, but that is the one that I do. So if you are an independent lawyer or you're a founder, you can come to do that. And I had somebody apply, and the application is very simple. It's around like, why does this matter right now? What's going on in the business right now that makes your leadership voice matter more? And in the briefing call after the application, this applicant he's a founder. He was either heading into Series B, this was a couple years ago, or had just closed it. I don't know. It was kind of in and around autonomous driving zones. Not exactly, but he was like a retrofit autonomous driving kit. Pretty cool technology, actually. And he was like, I need to learn how to slow down when I talk. And I'm like, dude, the difference between you and that next $100 million you need to raise, or that next $10 million partnership, is not about whether you speak quickly or not. Like, that's not the thing that will do the deal, so to speak. It can help, but we need to deal with your pace and stuff once I know, like, what is it that you have to say? So, not to get real tactical, but I have been just this year re-looking at my work again and noticing that there are like 6 attributes of some of the most, I'm going to call it clutch. You know that term clutch? Like just being absolutely clutch in a clutch moment. There's sort of 6 attributes I notice that are present in some of the most clutch communicators that I've either helped create or who come to me and need like refining. And what's cool about them is that, you can kind of self-evaluate, like, all right, I don't know, scale of 1 to 10, where do I fit there? And it'll help directionalize, like, all right, this is maybe where I want to pay attention to next. It's ever growing. I mean, I quoted Miles Davis earlier. Like, even Miles Davis still practices. I mean, not anymore, but you know what I mean? Like, forever.
Yeah.
So the first one is that really clutch communicators, they are unafraid, or they're afraid and they do it anyway, of being big in big moments. That doesn't mean being big and demonstrative. That doesn't mean kicking down doors. That doesn't mean, pew, pew, pew. That's not what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
What I'm talking about is they make the more courageous choice. I had a client 2 months ago. She's an alumni of mine. She came back. She's like, I have a big clutch moment coming up and I got to be clutch in that moment. And where we needed to focus was like helping her slow down and have the courage to really paint a technicolor picture for the audience that she was talking to. And that was really uncomfortable for her. And also she was like, gonna do it. So they make the choice to be big in big moments, number one. It was really good what she did. It was really good. And she did get the deal, which is really cool. The second attribute is they know their voice, which means they understand what's important about their founder or origin story. It's the drivers that matter. Like, oh, Dia loves adventure. No wonder she wanted to do truck driving and ended up flying around the world doing professional development, because they're both adventure. We want you to, great communicators who understand in conversation or in broadcast format, meaning, they're giving a keynote or they're whatever, they're pitching, or they really like understand their own voice. They know what their origin story is and they know how to tell it in terms of drivers, not in terms of like resumes. They like really understand the role that they use in the world. They know a lot about their own operating principles and their leadership philosophy and ways they can talk about. They really understand that they are not their venture. We'll talk about that's attribute number 6. So they really understand, they really know their voice and can claim it. And this is a little tricky because a lot of the stuff we do as leaders, and less for me because I don't lead teams, right? I'm a coach, but the stuff that feels very innate to you, folks are listening right now, I'm sure all of you have stuff that you do that feels so innate, you don't even realize it's a leadership philosophy. You're like, well, how else would I make that decision?
That's the conversation I raise sometimes of what they sometimes call unconscious competence. You just do it, it works, whatever. You You don't know how you do it really. You haven't really even thought through it. God forbid you
Totally.
have to try to train somebody else to do it.
Totally.
But a lot of times you can, with a coach, sort of break down. I've given this example before. I won't go too deep into it, but I did a course one time where they said that a lot of times, if you really analyze what you think you're unconsciously competent at, you actually have a system. Like for me, it's like business development. Like, oh, I'm just good at bringing in clients. Okay. When I realized out of this course, I'm like, okay, this is back in the days when you used to meet people in person. There was a way I greeted people. There's a way I always referenced the referral source. There was a way where I asked them about their business first, even if they asked me about my field. Like I realized, wait a second, I pretty much do the same thing every time. I was totally unconscious of it. I do have a system. I never wrote it down, never realized it even existed, but there's a way I do it.
100%. And for leaders who maybe aren't building a business that needs to be systematized, they have a system for making decisions and the way they lead that team. I had a client last year. She was like head of engineering. She was like, we were unpacking, what I call your point of view and playbook, which is like, what transformation are you trying to cause in the world? And how do you uniquely, like, what do you really talk about, which is not necessarily the topic of your business. I worked with a client who like owned a big construction company, but he talked about, we identified that like culture was actually the topic he needed to be talking about more as a way to carve a path for his own reputation in his industry.
Yes.
So what topic do you talk about in the world? What transformation are you trying to cause? And what's your playbook for doing that? This woman, head of engineering, she's so lovely and wonderful. She was like, what do you mean? How did I do that? And I was like, well, you built and deployed this product and you've been like hockey sticking it since how'd you do that? I was like, no, really, tell me, how did you get what are some things you tell your team? And she's like, well, we document for the next generation of builders. And I'm like, tell me about what that means. And she was like, isn't it obvious? No, it is not. So that is part of like knowing your voice, what we're talking about. Great. So that's attribute number 2. We did 2, right? We did big stand up in big moments and know your voice. And the third one is that they ask strategically. And this is maybe much more deal focused.
Yes.
I recognize like when it's time to make an ask and they don't make anemic, wimpy asks. They make meaningful asks that create value for everybody. And they know how to craft those. Okay. Like not craft the story, but they know like, I'm asking for these things and here's what they are. And they're not just like one thing. It's usually like it's a kaleidoscope of things that put together something that adds value in a market or in a deal. It's just like so much fun to talk about deals and I'm so glad that you know the deals aren't just about fundraising. There's like so much.
One of my commitments on this podcast is to really bring in all aspects. Like there's always a deal, there's always deal focus. People want to learn about deals, but there are so many things that can improve people's results, satisfaction, all this kind of stuff in deals that are beyond knowing how to value a company or knowing how to, or even, negotiate. There's post-integration stuff, there's closing, there's a million things. So I was particularly excited to have you on because these things that apply generally in any kind of big moment of pitch. I mean, listen, if you're looking to buy a company, sell a company, raise capital, do a very important strategic alliance or joint venture, well, you want to talk about big moments in your company. I mean, any of these kind of deals can be very big moments. So have the skill and have this breakdown. Okay, great. So this is awesome. So we're up to
so that's 3. We did 3. So 4 is, and it's related to strategic asks. Like you really spend time figuring out what the ask truly is.
Yeah.
And then the 4th one is like you have killer setups. You just have great setups that you can believe in, that you love delivering, that support your voice, that use the language aligned to your voice. Killer setups. I have 2 that we can share with your audience if you want to, but the ones that I have are some, but in the course of my work with folks, we custom build them based on like other information about their leadership voice. We're like, oh, this is one way in which you can set up a whole set of themes of asks you're going to be making in the next 6 months in your business tied to this particular initiative that like this setup works for you. Like you want to talk about systems? Let's actually unpack what is that 3-beat framework that's unique to you that you can use over and over again.
Love it. And the key is that it's not only unique to you, but it's a lot. I'm huge on authenticity, and I know that's become a buzzword that's lost, meaning in some situations or whatever. I talk about this in my negotiating work. People don't realize like hundreds of microfacial expressions that people may not consciously know, but they get. And it's why sometimes you feel like something feels off to you, whatever, you can't read it, whatever. There are all these ways that we gather information that's not just in our brain. And you can't fake authenticity. You can't fake communicating from a place that's true. Like people get that.
Yes. And for the clients that come to me, they'll say like, I want to be authentic, or they'll even say that doesn't feel authentic, but what they really mean, that doesn't feel familiar. So part of the challenge of
Right,
being clutch in these moments and killer setups is expanding your range such that you're not just like, if it doesn't feel exactly in this one way I'm super familiar with, then it feels inauthentic. That's garbage, because you can show up authentically if you know your voice, if you know what you're after, if you're totally in your own body in these high stakes moments because you understand who you are, then even when it's unfamiliar or something you haven't done before and it feels inauthentic, you can stick with it. So inauthentic is it's a little bit of a trap word.
Yeah.
And it also is useless in coaching. You can't tell somebody, just be authentic.
Right. Right. What does
If
that
somebody
mean?
told you just be authentic, you'd be like, what do I
That's
do?
right. That's right.
It doesn't mean anything. So all the stuff we're talking about here, these 4 attributes, we have 2 more. They actually are really, really tactical, but touch really high level things.
Yeah. I love that distinction. Yeah, 100% agree with it.
Okay. So
what's number 5?
sure. Number 5 is they bridge beautifully.
Yeah.
Which is like, I am not my venture. Whether you are an in-house professional, you have an in-house career, or you're a founder, you recognize that you are not your venture. Here's an example. So I had a client, he is in fintech, okay? And they're building some really cool fintech products that serve SMB in LATAM, okay? Awesome. They were going gangbusters. Now they're stumbling and they're going to go gangbusters again because that's how it goes. It's never perfectly up and to the right. And we realized that while he's building a fintech product, the thing he really like when he's drinking wine with his friends and they're getting into it, where his attention really is something he called autonomous finance. He was like, the future of healthy SMB finance is autonomous finance. And I was like, do you ever talk about that? He was like, absolutely not. And I was like, well, that's going to end. And we figured out how to bridge the way in which he stands in that point of view. And even though he's not technically building an autonomous finance product, it informs decisions that they make. And it's the context with which he leads his product development initiatives. Do you see? So that you can bridge elegantly your unique voice to whatever it is you're building. And that's relevant because those of you who are listening, like you might be running a fund today, and in 3 years, you're going to be a founder. And in 10 years after that, you're going to be an advisor, and you're still you. You just need to be able to bridge to each of those things you're working on. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Love that. I think that's a deeper journey than people acknowledge, right? Because first of all, we are so trained. There's a lot of messages out there, pressure, all this kind of stuff, whatever, to conform to environments. Now, that's very different than being aware of the audience you're speaking to, right? And speaking in a way that you can connect with them, right? While being who you are, while being true to who you are, as opposed to looking to conform to what you think they want to hear or who they think you should be or any of this monkey
head trash
that goes on in your mind. Yeah.
Right. Which is why I say bridge. You're bridging those worlds, your own inner world, the vision you have as a leader, somebody wants to have impact in your space, to the world of the audience, the people that you're maybe selling to the narratives that your company needs you to deliver that also makes the product pitch clear. Like you're bridging a lot of things.
Yes.
And the better you get at it, the more fun you are to listen to, the more we get to know you. We're like, oh, he's not just reading this SaaS product pitch right out of product marketing. He's actually being able to talk about the features and benefits, but then layer over the top of it his unique perspective about the direction of the business. Do you hear? Like it gets to be so much better.
Yeah.
And then it answers the question in the deal, why you?
Yeah.
And then the 5th one is pretty basic, and that is they prep like pros, man. And when I say prep, I don't mean like my best clients, they've gotten it that they don't just come to my session to tell me what they're gonna do. They actually come to my session and we do it.
Got it.
Like, don't talk to me about, okay, here's what your plan is. Like, we'll do that in some sessions, but very often I'm like, nope, time to rehearse it. And rehearse is kind of a lame word for it, but it is being willing to go like, okay, enough talking about it. Let me just do it and see how it sounds. Because when you do it, then it reveals to you like, oh, that setup went on too long. It always is different. Look, I wrote a book. It is never exactly how it sounds in your own head. So you have to actually get it on the page and then go, huh, that doesn't work the way I thought it would. There's so many other ways to prep.
And listen, if you've ever videoed yourself doing anything, whether it's giving a speech, whether it's skiing, whether it's whatever, what we think is going on in our mind and what we see on that video or listen to on that audio are shockingly very different. So, yeah.
Yeah, I love to say that, like, your experience of you is not my experience of you. I mean, how many times folks listening right now walked, out of a meeting or whatever, and you're like, oh, I bombed on that one. Didn't bomb at all.
Right.
Or the other ones were like, nailed it, did not. So it's not perfect. It's an art, but these 6 attributes are sort of real for some of my clients, aspirational for others. So we look at those and they become your focus areas. If you scaled yourself on 1 to 10 on each of those, like, do I really know my voice? Like, could I say I know what it is? Am I really good at putting together a strategic ask kind of beyond the numbers? Or how are my setups? Are they killer? Are they kind of good enough? A little bit anemic? Does my prep work suck, or is it not even efficient? So even 15 minutes is not actually very productive. And prep like a pro doesn't mean you're carving out days, but is it productive prep that feels really aligned to who you are and supporting your voice? If you can be like, not so much. I think I could be more dynamic in my setups. Okay, go pursue that development.
Sure.
That's what I'm looking for all the time with my clients. And like, as we started talking about, like, there's got to be stakes.
I love it. So just give us a quick recap of the 6.
Okay, so we've got number 1, willingness to be big in big moments. Number 2, I really know my voice.
Yeah.
Number 3, I can put together a strategic ask that adds value for everyone. 4, I've got in my back pocket killer setups. 5, I can bridge beautifully in a dynamic setup. And 6, I can prep like a pro.
Love it. And listen, folks, if it's not obvious to you how every single one of those, although some of them maybe automatically think, oh, that's more deal related, every single one of these is crucial for any kind of deal, whether you're pitching for capital, whether you're negotiating an M&A deal, whether you're sitting down with a potential strategic alliance partner, you name it.
Absolutely.
Comes into play.
Absolutely. And my crazy book, Ask Like an Auctioneer, is focused on those strategic asks, and it's fun and it's wild, but the stuff works. And then I run how do you know your voice is trickier? I have a 4-part framework I walk leaders and founders through to help have an answer to that. Cause know your voice can feel a lot like be authentic. It's mushy.
Everybody gets that it's the right goal, but we don't really know what it means.
Yeah, totally. And we can produce it. It's a content question. It's not a woo-woo question, really.
Yeah. Obviously, I'm sure there are many situations where you can't share particular companies' names or whatever, but any good stories around how people applied these things in deals, or maybe how they didn't apply them?
Sure. Crashing and burning. I try not to be involved in those too often, but for sure.
Well, they crashed and burned. That's when they came to you and said, I need help.
Yeah. They're rightfully afraid of crashing and burning. So 2 little ones. One of them is about having the right ask and a killer setup. Maybe we'll do that one first.
Yep.
So one of my clients was having to get in the way of some early investors doing a secondary deal.
Okay.
And he was like, caught wind of this. I can't have them do that without me being involved, because what they sell to each other could have an impact on my next fundraise, right? Because price has got to be the right price, et cetera. And it's just, it's intense. Managing your investors is like no joke, right? And we were working on crafting, like, all right, how do we get into this? Because you caught wind of it, you got to insert yourself, but you don't want to break rapport. You need to build trust. You also need to not be like the one that is things are being done to. You need to have an equal, maybe even a equal plus weight in this conversation, in this path. And we were putting together an ask, and the ask was like, hey, get me involved, like invite me into this conversation. And I was like, well, okay. What if they don't? And he's like, well, I'm going to insert myself anyway. And I'm like, well, then that's not an ask.
Right. That's a demand.
That's a demand. So it's kind of funny because it's a little too cold and a little too hot at the very same time, right? What's that nursery rhyme? Just like the porridge is a little too cold and a little too hot. It's a little too cold because it was like, well, I want to stay in rapport. And so I don't want to overstep. So I'll just like ask to be invited to the party. But it was a little too hot because if they had said no, he would have been like, fill in the blank, right? a little too cold, a little too hot. So instead, we decided to be big in a big moment and go, like, what do you really want? And that was literally an hour of talking through the full dynamic situation, understanding that the ask was actually multi-layered. It was about positioning himself in the conversation, but it was also about laying sort of, I'm going to say, like programatizing the way in which they'd arrive at the price, who was going to be involved with it. Like, it was a much more dynamic and robust ask. And, long story short, we put that together with a killer setup, and he was able to maneuver that entire deal. It took a month or two, beginning to end, but that initial insertion into the conversation was pretty, like, that itself was a deal.
Yeah.
Because it made possible the rest of it. Now, the setup we used was this mirror effect setup I like. Goes like this. It goes, I see you see me, and because of that, I see you. You don't say I see you, but you
Right,
basically
right.
are
But that's
saying,
what
like,
you're getting across.
yeah, you're getting across like, hey, I know what you're up to. I know what's important to you. I know where your values lie. I understand what's going on in your business right now and why looking a certain way or having things go one way or another is really important to you. And then you see me as like, here's what I'm up to. Here's where I'm going. And you start to reveal where what they're up to and what you're up to intersect.
This is so fascinating. I've had two of these calls recently. I deal with a lot of negotiating situations, right? And it's the same kind of thing. I had a particular situation with let's say, an executive who they have certain interests that affect their economic future, but they also think these particular things are best for the company. The CEO of the company has moved in a different direction on some things. And there's a part of the issue is that there's sort of this mixing because how much do they trust that she's actually coming from the best place for the company because it also benefits her financially to go in that direction, right? So it became a big issue or whatever. The part about acknowledging, like, I see you, right? The part about having her say to the CEO, I see the reasons why you think it's best for the company to move in this direction. I understand what you did. That's a piece that people skip over or have trouble with, right? I mean, obviously, anything else, it can't just be lip service. But if you truly take the time to really see where that person is coming from, understand that they're in a whole different world, that they have different pressures, they have different, objectives, they have different answering to a board or shareholders or
They're operating,
investors or whatever.
yeah, they're operating in a set of tensions that are really uncomfortable,
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just how far that goes to honestly acknowledge and see the other person, even if you still have a different view on how something should go. It's amazing I don't want to say miracle because it's like, it's consistently how, like how beneficial that is and how often people don't do that.
Yeah, and it touches on that other component of that other attribute of like making the choice to be big in big moments. It's actually kind of a big deal if you can recognize and give language to how stuck somebody else might feel but doesn't want to say it. And you don't need to say like, hey, you're really stuck, but you can find ways of making it clear to them that the tension that they're operating in or the stuckness that they might have or trying to serve two different masters or whatever it is, and to talk about it with a level head in a very pragmatic way, but absolutely from the heart is like, it is magic. And it takes courage to slow the conversation down and go like, all right, let me paint a picture here.
Yeah.
Like that does take courage because it's easy to go like, let's talk about features and benefits and features and benefits and features and benefits and features and benefits. Like that's easy. So I see you, you see me. And then because of that, which is about like the intersection, here's my ask or here's my offer or because let's be real, like sometimes an offer is actually an ask.
Yeah.
Okay. Or here's my proposal or here's whatever. So that is one killer setup that's been very useful, particularly in like one-on-one or 1-2, like very small rooms.
Yes.
I had an old mentor who said like some of the biggest things happen in very small rooms, Dia. And made me feel better about my work because sometimes, my work doesn't scale. It's scaled through somebody else's impact. I think we talked about in our pre-call that like my whole position is like small and deep. That's where I live. Like who are the two people I need to work with so that we can have a really big impact. So that's one example. And we were able to get unstuck and he got the price he needed. And it was, it was good. It was not painless because I don't want any of this to seem like the sausage gets made like that. It's hard and courageous. So there's that one. And then the other one was a client of mine needed to make, she was convening let's say her technology is basically a platform, a data platform that helps two sides of her equation, like a marketplace, but it's not a marketplace, two sides of her equation be successful. Okay.
Okay.
And she was bringing together something like a summit with those two sides of her equation to try to get them to say yes to opting in to being part of sort of like it's not a governance board, but that's the word I'm going to use right now, like a governance board for how they might build something as an industry so that everyone can, they weren't going to have to write any checks, $0. Okay, so this was a deal that wasn't about securing money. It was about securing a decision to engage in something.
Yeah.
Okay. And we recognized really clearly that this was much more of a storytelling task. And in that, first we had to go like, what's the ask you're asking for? And when she told me it, I was like, okay, but they're all in the room. The ask was like, engage in this initiative. And I was like, they're here already. So you already got your yes. Again, a little too cold.
Right.
I worked with an executive at a big open source company a handful of years ago, and he had come out of an enterprise that was not open source. And open source has a very specific kind of way of being in the world. And I was helping him get ready for a big summit talk. And clearly he said like, I want everyone in the room to be engaged. I was like, they're already engaged. Like these people have flown on their own nickel from all over the world and from some very obscure look. You got what you're asking for. If you recognize that you already have what you think you need to be asking for, what would you ask for next?
Right.
So for this example with this founder, we got really clear about what the ask was, and then it was killer setup all day long. And I probably made her talk twice as long as she really wanted to in the setup. We used the storytelling about the story of the birth of Visa and how Visa became basically the pipes for transactions for all of the Visa credit cards, because Visa is not actually a product, it's an infrastructure. And that was built by industry partners, like individual banks and stuff came together to make that.
Yeah.
Before I'd let her even get to the next chapter in the story, I'm like, paint more picture. Tell me what that really meant. What was the feeling in the industry at that time? Now give me 3 examples of numbers, not 2 examples or 1 examples, 3. Like I just made her embellish. She's ex-military veteran who's turned to civilian leadership and is like, she's a data scientist. And she was like, no extra words. And I was like, no extra words,
Because you're painting a picture, you're not just giving a series of facts.
Decided to show up big in big moments. We had the right ask in that moment. She told me after 2 things. People came up to her afterwards, choked up about recognizing that the Visa story had made everyone in the room recognize the moment they were in the industry.
Yeah.
And that like they kind of had an opportunity to set up like a change that could have a very long tail impact.
Yes.
And then 2, I asked her how much the ask you made in the room. Everyone said yes. They were all like, yes, we're in. I was like, how much value did that create? She said, I think it was probably worth $10 million to the business. So this is what I mean is like these asks that can actually generate value for everyone in the room. Anyway, those are my 2 stories. Thanks for asking. It's fun. I feel like bragging on behalf of my clients.
I love it. All right. So we are at time here, unfortunately, because I feel like we can talk for hours more.
We certainly can.
But if people want to find out more about what you do and your business and your offerings and all the great work you're doing, where do they go?
Sure. Connect with me on LinkedIn. That's the best place. And then as I just live in a B2B environment, so there's that.
Yeah.
You can find my book at asklikeanauctioneer.com. It's super fun. It was designed to, you start it on an airplane in San Francisco and you're done by the time you land in Boston. You can give it to your best friend. It's like that. And then I didn't want a nonfiction book to read like a dictionary, so I made sure it didn't. Folks are interested in developing their own leadership voice in their domain because they're in a moment right now. I run those the Transformational Voice Intensive 3 times a year, and you can find out all about that and other work I do, the talks I give, et cetera, at diabondi.com.
Love it. So Dia, my final question on the podcast is always about my highest value in life, which is freedom. And for me, that means everything from freedom around the world for all people from oppression to why I have been an entrepreneur for decades and haven't had a boss. What does freedom mean to you, and how does it impact your life and business?
Freedom to me goes back to my 2 core drivers, which is the opportunity to pursue adventure and the freedom to create deeply connected experiences with my clients and my peers and folks like you, Corey.
Love it. Dia Bondi, thanks for being such a great guest on the Deal Quest podcast.
So much fun.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of Deal Quest. where we help you understand how deal-driven growth can be your ticket to freedom. If you are interested in finding out more about my law firm, the services we provide to entrepreneurial and growing companies across industries all over the country, and my partner Brian Megan and I, and my amazing team, just head over to cupferlaw.com. That's cupferlaw.com, and if you want to follow more of my content, head over to my LinkedIn page where I post regularly. I'm Corey Kupfer. Until next week, wishing you the freedom and financial prosperity that I know your deal quest will bring.